A big hello to all my movie hunters. I'm Dusan, and today my special guest is David Schumann, the owner of VHS Revolution. You should definitely check it on Instagram. It's a wonderful page dedicated to 80s, 90s, VHS, wonderful movies, anniversaries, and all kinds of stuff. David, thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
No problem. Thanks for asking me to be here. This is great.
Yeah, it's wonderful to talk to another collector who still loves this beautiful medium.
Yes.
It's excellent.
It's
So,
ridiculous.
how it all started, when did you start collecting?
Well, I guess you could say it started when I was a kid. Growing up, that was how we watched movies. We watched them on VHS and we would go to I grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and there was a local video store called Video Plus on Dunbar that I used to go to all the time. And I ended up working there when I was older, and it was great. It was like a local video store, and this is a little bit before Hollywood Video opened across the street, so everybody went to Video Plus. And if you wanted Home Alone on a Friday night and they didn't have it, well, then you had to find something else. And I think I barely remember us having to rent the VCR as well. There were times where you had to rent the VCR along with the movie if you didn't have a VCR. But we had a VCR from, an early age, and that was just how we watched movies. I mean, of course, I would go see them in the theater. My dad would take me to see Back to the Future or Batman or, all the big movies that you could see at the time. And once the VHSs started being available to buy for a reasonable price, then I started buying more. And my favorite movies at the time were Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, and I wanted those VHSs as soon as possible. And those are probably the two movies that I've watched the most in my life because I just watched them both over and over and over again every day. Never got sick of them. In fact, I just played Ghostbusters
Mm-hmm.
yesterday on the channel.
Nice.
And
You can
so what's that? There's your version. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is our version. So you can see Serbian version how it looks.
Right, right.
Yeah.
This is mine. This is actually the I've had the same VHS since 1985 when it came
So
out. I've never updated. It's probably my favorite tape, and it still plays. Still looks good. Um, probably not as good as maybe one of the updated versions that they released later. But anyway, so my family had a good amount of VHSs. Probably because of me, they ended up having more, Die Hard and Star Wars and all the movies that we grew up watching. And uh, I loved the video boxes so much that I would tape a movie off of TV, like Ghostbusters, or I remember taping Days of Thunder off of our movie channel. The movie channel in Canada, in Vancouver, was called Super Channel. It was
uh-huh.
like the Canadian version of HBO. And so I would tape bunch bunch of tons of movies, Days of Thunder, and then the channel had a monthly magazine that they would send out
Hmm.
with articles about the movies themselves and posters, little magazine sized posters, and I would cut them up and then I would glue them to the VHS cover
Hmm.
box of like whatever tape it was, if it was Memorex or you know BASF or something, and I would cover it with the pictures from Days of Thunder and put the
Hmm.
title on the spine and everything. So it was like my own version of VHS. But then DVD came along and our VHSs went in a closet or whatever. But when I moved to Los Angeles in 2002, I took some of them with me, mostly just kind of as antiques to put on my shelf, either at home or at work. And I would have 10 or 12 VHSs just on my shelf at work. And for the longest time, that's just what they were. I never even watched them again because how would I?
Hmm.
I didn't have a VCR anymore. I just had DVD. But then But then I had this idea. So I'm an editor. I edit movie trailers,
Uh-huh.
and and my edit bay was kind of like a rectangle, and my desk was here, my computers, and then in the back there was a couch,
Mhm.
and then there was a little area between the couch and the wall, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could just get one of those little TV VCR combos that they used to have at barber shops or skate shops, and just put it in the back corner and just play some of those VHS movies that I've had. And so that was the beginning of the idea. Uh, and so that became kind of like an in-joke thing at work, is like, what's today's movie? I would just play
Mhm.
Taxi Driver or The Killer or Ghostbusters or whatever movies I had. And then a coworker came by and said, you know that they sell VHS movies at thrift stores for like 25 cents or a buck.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I did not know that. And so I started going to thrift stores, and they did. In fact, there was a thrift store in LA that's no longer there, out of the closet, and they had uh, these big bins, and they were like, you know, I don't know if it was like five for $1. I think it was
Mhm.
five movies for $1. And I just I came out of there with like, I don't know, 25 movies or something that I only paid $5 for. And so gradually I started getting more and more, some that I used to have when I was younger that we had gotten rid of for whatever reason, and others are just movies that I liked. And so then I started the Instagram channel.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm not a collector in the same way that other people are collectors. So I don't just collect everything. Some
Mhm.
people collect everything. Some people collect workout tapes, weird horror movies, and that's not exactly what I do.
Mhm.
So I just collect movies essentially that I would play on the channel. That's kind of how I do it. So I have collected um quite a few now. I do have quite a few now in my collection,
You
but
know
they're all
exact
kind of,
number.
yeah, it's about 1600. It's a little over
Amazing.
1600.
Amazing. I have
Yeah.
around 1,000.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And but I don't have a lot of, like, I see some of the stuff behind you. I don't have a lot of those old horror movies. I've never been a big horror fan, so my
Mhm.
horror selection is lacking. And I'm sure if I did collect, I would probably have, you know,
Mhm.
twice as many as I have now, but I don't have the space. I had a friend build this shelf for us, and very generously, and it's filled on both sides.
Mhm.
So I have to, it's not quite filled, but it's almost filled, and so I have to be careful now how many more I add to it. Plus, I don't know if you can tell, but the way I've organized it is by, on this side is by actor.
Mhm.
So it's like all the Brad Pitt movies, all the Mel Gibson, Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis, Schwarzenegger, Tom Cruise, all the big stars.
Mhm. Mhm.
I thought it would be fun to have a section where it's just organized by them. And then on the other side, it's alphabetical. I'm in the process of reorganizing everything, kind of, but what was my point? I lost my point. That's my story.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. We all share the same problem about space. You know, the moment you start buying
Yeah,
more and adding more, you end up in in a dump. It's not, it doesn't even look like a club anymore or something like that.
right, right, exactly.
Where are you getting them now? Do you still get them?
Yeah, I still get them, a little less frequently. Um, Mostly at thrift stores, or there's two video stores in LA that I go to. Be Kind Video in Burbank is an actual video store with VHSs and DVDs and Blu-rays, and they actually rent videos. They popped up I think a couple years ago, and those guys are great. They're both named Matt, the guys who own it,
Mhm.
and they have screenings in there, and they're just really awesome. They are video lovers. And so I'll go in there, and they always have tons and tons of VHSs everywhere. And the other is a place called Whammy, also in LA, in Silver Lake, and they're the same. They have just tons of VHSs, old cassettes, and they also have screenings and stuff like that as well. And then the rest are just kind of thrift stores. If I'm in a town that has a thrift store, or if I'm somewhere, I'll go in and check it out. And occasionally I'll find something other than Jerry Maguire or Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, or Titanic. Those are the most commonly seen VHSs. I see those everywhere. Um, but and then occasionally I'll go on Facebook Marketplace and just see what I can find. Sometimes I'll find a really good deal. This woman, I earlier in the year, I found this woman who had like 5 or 6 bins full of VHSs, and she was getting rid of them, and she gave me like a good price, and so that just meant more, and so now with 1,600 movies, I'm kind of running out of movies that I want. Like I think I have every Schwarzenegger movie that's available on VHS, and I think I have every Tom Cruise movie. No, I don't have Eyes Wide Shut, and I don't have some of his earlier ones like Taps or something. But I have quite a bit, so it's getting a little harder to find those things that I both want to add to the collection and that I also think I'll play.
Do you have some of those super rare editions that worth like thousands of dollars? You know, you see it on eBay, like $85,000 for Star Wars or something like that.
I don't. The reason I think that a lot of those are worth so much is because that they still have the original
Hmm.
plastic wrap. So if a tape is still wrapped in its original packing, that makes it worth a lot more. But just a regular, like,
Hmm.
as special as this is to me, it's worth nothing. I mean, the edges are frayed. The tape is worn. This would probably sell for $2.
Hmm.
Um, so no, I don't really have anything like that. I don't really. Although there was a guy who was selling a still wrapped Batman VHS,
Oh yeah.
and he was selling it for only $15, and I thought that's a good deal. I should get that, but I never did.
Yes. I actually have Little Weapon still wrapped.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and I got it for
That's
like five
beautiful.
dollars.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
so people
I
appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, yeah, but a lot of I find that like the whole myth of the Disney VHS that's worth thousands of dollars, it's very rare.
Yeah.
It's not as common as I think people think.
Do you have those movies that you have on VHS? Do you have them as well on DVDs or?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes. I think I have like the Star Wars movies, the Die Hards. I have Die Hard in I should have gotten this in a stack for you, but I have Die Hard in the original VHS, the CBS Fox, yeah, the CBS Fox VHS. I have it on widescreen VHS. I have it on DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, and I also have it digitally.
So
So that's probably the only movie that I have every single format.
yeah, I've
But
never
a lot of them
upgraded to
go.
4K.
What's that?
I've never upgraded to 4K. I'm still around
Yeah,
Blu-ray or something.
yeah. I think my buddy Jay bought me the Die Hard 4K. I think that's the only 4K disc I have. I really don't buy physical media as much as I used to
Mhm.
for DVDs and Blu-rays. I've kind of converted to buying my movies on iTunes, and I know the quality is not as perfect, but it's fine for me.
Exactly. People usually base their opinion on the quality of the picture and quality of the sound, but there is that some special feeling when you watch those old videotapes on full screen and you see,
Yes.
even that dust or something, do you have those certain damages on tape or something like that? It
Yeah.
adds to it, it's interesting to see it.
Well, that's the reason I started the channel in the first place is because I wanted to bring back that nostalgic feeling of watching movies the way we did growing up, on these little TVs and in full screen. I I've seen Ghostbusters, I don't know, 300 times or whatever, and most of the times that I saw it was full screen.
Yeah.
It was full screen. So when I first saw it widescreen, there were things in the frame that I had never seen before, and it almost felt weird. It almost felt like a different movie in some ways. So the scene in Ghostbusters when they bust Slimer in the hotel and they come out and they're dealing with the hotel owner and he's being a bit of a dick. Um, in the full frame version, you just have Bill Murray and he's negotiating. But in the widescreen, you see Harold Ramis next to him, like gesturing with amounts of money that they should charge. And I had never seen that before. It was really wild. It was really funny.
Yeah, it's amazing to
Um,
discover something. But here, the problem was when they converted to widescreen, they usually just add those two black bars and they actually cut
yes.
the movie. Yeah, I
And,
remember
and that was, yeah, that was funny back in the
we
day.
watched the
Think,
movie Hear No Evil, See No Evil, Hear No Evil with the big,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you play it on VHS and you watch full screen, when there's a scene when John Severance gets out of a bathroom and then you can see, full screen and the camera goes up to here, but
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
DVD version, it goes around here. So,
Yeah. Well, I remember watching In the Company of Men on VHS,
mhm,
and they, instead of zooming in for video, they just took the black bars off, which exposed the boom mic. And so then at the time, I think I probably knew better, but there were definitely people who were like, "Oh, they made a mistake. The boom mic is still in the shot." But it wasn't in the shot in the theatrically released version. They just didn't know that the people who released the VHS didn't want to spend the money and they just took the black bars off.
mhm.
So, and I remember seeing a clip of Martin Lawrence on a talk show when he did Bad Boys, and they showed a clip from the movie of the chase scene where he jumps on the cab and then the cab stops and he rolls off. And in the clip when he rolls off, you see the mat that he lands on the street. And in the movie, you don't see that because the black bar cover whatever he landed on, the soft mat that he landed on.
Huh,
Um,
interesting.
so yeah, so you have to. I think at the time, movie viewers were not as aware of that kind of stuff, but as DVD started coming out and special features and
Mhm.
all the magazines about that stuff, Premiere and Entertainment Weekly, that kind of showed more of the behind the scenes process. Um, they became more diligent in their matting and unmatting.
It's interesting about those special features. Now, before DVD, I never knew that there were some either additional scenes, or deleted scenes, alternative versions, or something like that. Because on our VHS movies, we only had
Yeah.
trailers for other movies
Oh,
and the movie itself.
right, right.
Then I discovered an American version when I got the DVD, region-free DVD player that had, combination of VHS and DVD that you can use
Yeah.
both. Then I discovered, there are some additional scenes in the old version. Never knew
Oh,
about it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember back in the 80s, they had televised making of um, TV specials.
Mhm.
I remember watching the making of Return of the Jedi, and it was like 30 minutes long, and they showed all this behind the scenes footage of the making of the movie, and I ate that stuff up. Um, and the interesting thing is, as VHS, so the last VHS was produced in 2005.
Mhm.
But I mean, DVDs started coming out in 1996, 97. So that's a long period of time where DVDs and VHSs are still being made. And and if you look at some of the VHSs from like 2003, 4, 5, they'll have little bonus features at the end
Mhm.
of the movie. They'll have a little featurette in addition to the trailers that played before the movies. So they were trying to compete in a way with DVD, which seems kind of ridiculous now. Um, but yeah, I remember my first DVD was Three Kings,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Look at all these special features!" Like it just blew my mind. it was so cool.
Yeah, just like audio commentary, for the first time you hear the
Oh
director
yeah.
or actors talking about the movie at the same time, you can play it, watch the movie, and hear. It was amazing feeling to see something like that.
I love DVD commentaries, and there was one on Three Kings. I love listening to Coppola's commentaries. Thank you. Coppola's commentaries on his movies, on The Godfather, and excuse me. And I ate those up as well. And then when I discovered a little hack that I could rip the movie, I could rip the audio commentary from the DVD and save it as an MP3. And so then I just created this huge playlist of audio commentaries that I
Uh-huh.
would just listen to while I worked,
So
whether I had seen the movie or not. And I still have all those. I love listening to them sometimes. Just listening to these guys, Bogdanovich and Coppola and Fincher and Soderbergh, guys who recorded a lot of commentaries, talk about their process. I love that.
it's also interesting that we have PAL or PAL and you have
Yeah,
NTAC
yeah.
versions. So the difference is they say the quality of PAL version is better. Do you have
Oh,
any
really?
PAL version in your collection or
No,
only NTSC?
no, no. They're all NTSC.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know that. I didn't know that the quality of PAL was
yeah.
was
They
pretty good.
say that for NTAC it's around 480p, and here it's around 520 or 540. So
Huh.
there are some slight differences, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah.
So it's interesting to notice something like that. And for me, it was always interesting that if I could get American version, I couldn't play it here unless I have region-free video player
Right.
for that. Yeah.
Right. Right.
So in kind of, we were limited that we could only get our own editions. But we
Yeah.
say that NTAC was widely available, and we had to wait for conversion for our own. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have that problem here. Everything was available. Um, I remember there was another a video store that I would go to often, and they would have the posters on the wall
Oh
for
yeah.
upcoming movies. And I loved, there were VHSs that I would look at every time I visited the store.
Mhm.
Cover, I just loved looking at the boxes. That's really when I fell in love with movies in general,
Mhm.
was, not just watching movies, but the whole process of making movies, movie posters, soundtracks. I would look at the credits and see who directed this and what else has he done, and the producers and the composers and the cinematographers and the editors. And I ate that stuff up. And then reading Premiere Magazine and Entertainment Weekly, I wanted to know more about all the movies that I saw. But I remember looking at the cover of Escape from New York
Mhm.
when he's on the street and he's running away, and there's the head of the,
Oh
I
yeah.
think, the Statue of
Statue
Liberty
of
behind
Liberty.
it. And I just thought, what is this movie? This looks so cool. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is that I still have never seen the movie. I've never seen Escape from New York, which is on my list of
Mhm.
movies that I totally should have seen by
But
now.
people
But
usually forget how important the cover is because we
yeah,
base our own interest on that cover. I actually wanted to
totally,
show you something.
totally.
This is Soylent Green, two versions
Okay.
that we
Uh-huh.
have.
Uh-huh.
This one is from
Yeah.
1992, and this one is 2003. And
Uh-huh.
what's the difference between those
Totally.
two
Yeah.
versions when you have it?
Yeah.
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 So just based on that one image, you would pick the movie because there was
Yeah.
no internet back then just to check it, what it's about, who is
Right.
the actor
Right.
or something. Yeah.
The most you could do is ask the whoever was behind the desk, have you seen this or have you heard of this? And sometimes they had and sometimes they hadn't. And so that was, I think, also one of the cool things about watching movies at that time that kids today just don't get, which is, what is this? This looks cool. I'll check it out,
Exactly.
and then you either love it or you don't or whatever. Um, but now because of streaming and Netflix, it's, we pretty much just watch the things that we're interested in. Very rarely do we ever watch things that we don't know anything about. or have never heard of.
Actually, the process was to build your own taste based on certain movies that you stumble upon. You just discover a certain movie and then you start looking for that actor or director or genre or something like that, and you start
Yeah,
filming with that. Yeah,
yeah,
and I think we miss that, all of us. Spending hours
definitely.
searching through those bins. Looking at those unknown movies that we can't even discover. There are a lot of movies that stayed on VHS and never got transferred to either DVD
Definitely.
or Blu-ray or 4K.
Mostly sci-fi and horror movies. Yeah, that is wild to think that there were movies that, if you grew up in that time, you saw, but maybe, I remember there was this, I think it was a Japanese movie called Inframan that I used to watch as a kid. Uh, and then I kind of forgot about it until I saw a couple of years ago they re-released it on Blu-ray and 4K or something, and
Mhm.
I thought, my God, it's been 30 years since I've seen that movie, and it's a shame because if you made a movie back then and weren't able to get it released on DVD or Blu-ray, that's just millions of people that aren't able to see your movie.
Yeah, sometimes they just get lost in time. You can't get them
They
anywhere.
do. Yeah,
Those VHS they can't be found anywhere, and there is no way to get it. There is no way to even
that's right.
transfer it to DVD on your own if you want to use a video card or something like that, on your computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but going back to what you were saying, I remember tons of times going, especially if you had like a sleepover or birthday party, going to Blockbuster with my friends and spending at least an hour, at least the length of a movie, trying to decide which movie to get.
Mhm.
And then, um, everybody would want something different. Somebody would want Predator. Somebody else would want Ace Ventura. Somebody else would want, Escape from New York. And then trying to compromise, eventually, eventually you would compromise on something, and then you would just go back to their house and play video games. Like so many times we didn't even end up watching the movie.
And the next
Um,
week you have to rent it all over again.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it was
And
fun.
sometimes if you really liked it, you would incur those late fees just wanting to watch the movie a second time or a third time. Um, yeah, that's the thing that I miss the most about those days is not just with video stores, but also music stores, going into music stores and just spending time in there looking at different CDs, different cassettes, albums, going through the hip hop section and the soundtrack section, and that was that was my jam. Like I loved
Mhm.
going to those physical media stores and looking at videos and DVDs and music and magazines, going to bookstores and reading magazines. My routine when I would go to a movie, once I started going to movies by myself, I would leave early and go down to like the Barnes and Noble or Chapters or whatever big bookstore there was, and just hang out in the magazine section for a while and just look through all the magazines that I didn't feel like buying, but that I was interested in this article or that article, and then I would go to the movie, and it was great. I got to do all that on my own time, and I could stay for the end credits,
Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
know.
I always watch the end credits. Always.
Yeah,
Still.
my friends gave me shit for staying through the end credits, but little did they realize that was actually going to be part of my future.
That's right. We have to thank Marvel for that. Now everyone has to wait for end credits.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch them before there was an end credit scene,
Mhm.
um, because I really for a couple of reasons. One was I really was interested in who made the movie.
Me
I
too.
did want to, and it was fascinating to me that you look at the credit block and you see director, writer, producer, composer, editor, but then there's this list of all these other people: assistants, grips, best boys, gaffers, um, people in the production offices, all of the people who work to get a movie made, and that stuff just fascinated me. But also, if I was really moved by a movie, let's say The Thin Red Line, I didn't want to just get up and leave. I
Mhm.
wanted to stay there and listen to the music of the score and still stay in the movie as long as I could. Um, and that was even when I met my wife, you know, 95% of people, the lights come up, the credits start, and they leave.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
just how people do it. But I had to tell her, like, no, I stay for the credits, and she would stay with me.
Well, I
Uh,
discovered my favorite composers thanks to that Alan Silvestri, Jerry Goldsmith, James Horner, Elliot
yeah,
Goldenthal, all of them, because thanks
yeah,
to watching those credits, because I want
yeah,
to see who was involved in this project, because it's a project. It's not just based on five people who
yeah.
produced it or something like that. It's much more, much bigger, broader.
Oh yeah, the Back to the Future soundtrack was one of the first cassette tapes I ever owned,
Yeah.
and that Silvestri score is just one of my favorites. And I became a Silvestri fan because of Back to the Future. And then with uh, um, Forrest Gump, I listened to the Forrest Gump score the whole summer. And that's funny because I would listen to music, hip hop and rock and R&B. I listened to all kinds of music, but I would also listen to film scores, on my Walkman, in the car with my family or on the
Mhm.
bus or walking. The music became a part of my life as much as songs on the radio. And so the summer of 94, my two favorite movies were Speed and Forrest Gump, and I bought those scores as soon as. But there's always the realization when you buy the soundtrack that the soundtrack back in those days was just filled with songs,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
didn't care about the songs. I cared about the score. So the Forrest Gump soundtrack had all the songs from the era, and it had one Alan Silvestri suite at the end. But then you had to wait a couple of months later or a few weeks later. They released the scores, and I would buy the score.
Excellent, excellent. So this year there are a bunch of anniversaries, whether 30 years or 40 years of our favorite movies.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Terminator, Ghostbusters. I mean, even those that were in 94, like Shawshank Redemption,
Yeah.
Forrest Gump, all of them.
The the I what I've noticed, and I've done little reels on my page
I watched them all.
looking at looking at the summer movie. Thank you. Looking at the summer movies of 2004 and 94 and 84, and those 3 years, it's incredible how many classic movies came out in those years. I mean, of course, classic movies came out in every year, but the amount of classic movies, I think Ghostbusters and Gremlins were released on the same day. And to look at the release dates, if you just look at list of American movies from 1984, Wikipedia has the entire release schedule, and you can see like this week is a banger, this week is a banger, this week is like just classic after classic, and it's pretty incredible. I mean, 94, not just the summer, but yeah, like you said, like the fall, Shawshank Redemption, Quiz Show, Pulp Fiction, Natural Born Killers,
Yeah,
Legends of the Fall, Dumb and Dumber.
The
It's just
Mask.
endless.
Yeah,
The Mask in the
yeah,
summer, yeah, exactly. And what's funny is, Jim Carrey had his first year of movies was 94,
yeah,
and he had three classics.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. And I kind of miss those days of movie stars as well, when if Jim Carrey was in a movie, you just went to see it,
exactly.
you know?
Yeah, we hear that more and more that people don't go to watch certain movie because of an actor. They watch it
Right.
because of the character. And people
Hmm.
start to complain about it because we don't even have any major stars anymore. I mean, we have stars in a way that they earn a lot of money, but it's not like
Yeah.
they by themselves attract the audience when they do something that's not based on their own interest, something like that. When you,
Yeah.
for example, if we use Robert Downey Jr., we love him as Iron Man, but it's a rare occasion that people will go to see some of his other projects just because it's Robert Downey or Chris
Yeah.
Hemsworth or whoever.
Exactly. Chris Hemsworth is a great example. He's like what you would consider a major movie star, but Rush, In the Heart of the Sea,
Mhm.
these other movies that he made that weren't Marvel were not as big hits. And uh, but there was a time where you put Tom Cruise's face on a poster even Far and Away made money. Even his lesser hits were still would open at number one. Uh, and that was that sweet spot of the 80s and the mid 90s where anytime Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise or Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone was in a movie, people would go see it. There were every actor has their hits and misses, but it was definitely different than it was now. I mean, you look at somebody like Glenn Powell,
Hmm.
who is in Twisters and he was in Anyone But You and Hitman, and he's great. I really love him, but he doesn't quite have that level of star power where I'm going to watch anything because he's in it yet. He's a great actor, and I like that he's blowing up and uh, making a lot of big movies. I thought he was really great in Richard Linklater's film Everybody Wants Some
Hmm.
from 2016. Um, but yeah, it is different. And even Tom Cruise, you can kind of feel it now. He was able to switch from, I mean, most of the movies he did before Mission Impossible were dramas,
Hmm.
or thrillers, A Few Good Men and The Firm. And now he's pretty much staying in that action mode.
Yeah,
And I miss the variety of movies that he made. I
exactly.
I
We
hope
constantly watch
I
either
hope
Mission
after this Mission
Impossible.
Impossible,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I
Yeah.
hope he goes back to dramas or something after the Mission
He
Impossible.
is incredibly talented. Like I say, it's a shame that he's never won an Oscar, especially for Collateral. I mean, he was amazing in that.
Totally,
Last
totally.
Samurai, or well, we can have tons of movies listed there because he's
Yeah,
amazing in everything.
yeah,
Valkyria. I mean, all those movies are classics, but
yeah,
somehow he never got even a chance to be nominated for some of them.
yeah.
Surprised by it.
I think Collateral is definitely his most underrated performance. And every time I watch that movie, I think, like, I mean, not only why wasn't he nominated for an Oscar? When you look back at the list of Best Actor nominees from that year, he easily could have fit in. But also, I just think the performance is one of his like most subtle and unusual with the gray hair and the
Mm-hmm.
different look. It really doesn't feel like Tom Cruise.
Exactly.
It's one of the very few movies he's done where it doesn't feel like him. It really feels like that character, and he's not trying to look good or be likable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's just yeah, it's just great.
When you mentioned about the trailers, back then when we see a trailer, we get excited by it. It
Yeah,
looks not revealing too much, but still you want to see the movie. There's something intriguing about it. Now the
yeah,
problem is you can see the whole movie in those 3 minutes. Now, as someone
yeah,
who works as a man who creates trailers, how do you
yeah,
explain it? How can you create something that won't have to show too much to audience?
yeah. Well, like movies, movie trailers are not just made by one person.
Mhm.
They're sometimes not even edited by one person, depending on what's happening with that project or with that editor. If an editor works on a trailer and then goes on vacation, somebody else takes it over, or if the thing that people don't know about trailers is that often for a big movie, a Marvel movie or a big project, the studio will go out to different vendors, different trailer companies to do a trailer. And even within that company, they'll have multiple editors cut trailers. So in the beginning, they can have six different trailers for one movie cut by six different editors. And then they kind of see this approach and that approach and this music and that music, and they kind of whittle it down. Um, but typically, it's a long process, a lot longer than you think. And you sometimes start from a feature. Most of the time now, you start from dailies. They literally give you all the footage, all the dailies. And sometimes an assistant editor at the company has to assemble the movie in a super rough form just so you can kind of get a sense of it. And that's why there's shots and takes in the trailer that don't make it into the
Right.
movie, because you'll cut the trailer a certain way, or you'll cut a piece a certain way, and the studio will love it as it works in the trailer, but the editors of the movie will kind of go in a different direction. You know, a good example is the line reading of Downey in the Avengers trailer of billionaire playboy philanthropist is different in the trailer. It's funny in the trailer, but in the movie, it's more serious.
Mhm.
And because they're just kind of different things. And what I tell people who I do trailers for is there's the story of the movie and then there's the story of the trailer. And sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have to kind of mask certain plot points or um, look at Gladiator 2. The Gladiator
Mhm.
2 trailer shows a lot of Denzel, making it seem like he's a big part of the movie. He might only be in like 15 minutes total of the movie,
Mhm.
maybe, maybe not, but Denzel's a big star and you want to kind of highlight him. Uh, and getting back to your question, the reason that some trailers show so much of the movie is because initially the editor will probably do a trailer or a teaser that doesn't show too much, right? And then what happens is nowadays they the studio people take these trailers and they take them into their meetings and they watch it and then they get feedback from other people in the marketing department and they say, "Well, I'm not clear about this. Why is so and so doing that and who is this guy and what's going on there with this conflict? I don't understand that." And so then we work on it and we try to flesh out those motivations and character aspects, and then they will show the trailer to members of the public for testing.
Mhm.
They'll actually test the trailers, and much in the same way that a movie gets tested, and they'll get feedback. What did you respond to? Was this clear? Who did you like? Would you want to see this movie? And then we get all that information back and have to make changes according to the testing. And so what sometimes happens is the studio thinks it's better to show more of the movie so
Mhm.
people know exactly what they're getting, and that the majority of people who see a trailer uh, will not even remember the trailer. They'll just think, "Oh, this movie looks big," or "This movie looks cool," or and I want to go see it. But for the majority of people, it's not really a problem um, because by the time the Gladiator 2 doesn't come out until November. So by
Mhm.
the time the movie comes out, if you've seen the trailer now, most people who just watch trailers on YouTube or in the theaters won't even really remember the stuff that was in the trailer. Um, but for us trailer editors or people who watch trailers and love trailers, I think the trailer was too long. I think they could have come out with a teaser first to just kind of tease it a little bit before this. Like, it's not that I feel that I've seen the whole movie. I just feel like I've seen too much of the movie too early.
The problem is usually with spoilers because we get those major spoilers or twists or something like that, or some characters that we shouldn't be aware of that they're in the movie or cameos or something like that. It's better to see it in a movie rather than see it
Yeah.
in the trailer.
Yeah, I remember watching the trailer for The Departed, and there's a shot of Wahlberg that comes at the end of the movie when he's in the tracksuit and the gloves and he
Mm,
raises up his gun. And I remember watching the movie and thinking, "Oh, I haven't seen that shot yet."
exactly.
So it must be coming, which means his character doesn't die. And spoiler alert, and you know,
Exactly. It was like for me when I watched the Beverly Hills Cop 4, Axel Foley. I
yeah,
knew there's a scene where three of them will be sitting in the car again, after these 40 years. That's the same scene.
yeah,
Because I saw
yeah,
it in the trailer. And now the movie is ending, and I'm waiting for that scene because I can't
yeah,
do this.
right,
Yeah.
right,
And then I
exactly,
get it.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, sometimes there are bits that work for the trailers, especially with comedies that don't end up making it into the
Mhm.
movie. But yes, I noticed that too in Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley, which I just watched yesterday, and it's it's what I said about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is
Mhm.
that it's definitely the fourth best Indiana Jones. Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley is definitely the third best Beverly Hills Cop movie.
I think we all
It's
agree on that. And like I said, the
yeah,
thing is, it wasn't necessary, for that movie to exist.
no,
But maybe it's a better farewell to Axel Foley and all the team rather than number three because the third one wasn't good at all. It was a major
oh man,
disappointment. Yeah.
The third one is terrible.
Yeah,
I mean, it is awful.
yeah.
It is so like the story is dumb, the bad guys are stupid. John Landis, I mean, if I didn't know that he had directed movies before, I would say he has no idea how to direct a movie because the action is so flat and so stale. The energy of the movie is so low. Like nothing works about the movie. Even the action sequence on the
Parasol, yeah.
whatever the carousel, yeah, whatever
Mhm.
that thing is kind of cool, but it also makes no sense because the bad guys like intentionally stop this ride and then he has to like rescue some kids and it's all just like such lazy filmmaking. Uh and the first one is great and the second one is really good. I love Tony Scott. I'm a huge Tony Scott fan
Me too. Yeah.
from True Romance and Crimson Tide and Enemy of the State, even some of his lesser known movies like Deja Vu
That
or
was amazing. I love that movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love Deja Vu as well. And I'm sad that he's not still around making movies. But yeah, Axel Foley, Axel F, the fourth one is fine. I just would have loved a director who brought a little bit more visual
Mhm.
pizzazz to the movie. There, a lot of shots just felt like okay, I've seen now the same angle of him driving, the same. A lot of it was like medium close ups. The camera doesn't move a lot. I don't know. It just felt kind of a little stale, but
When
definitely
I
better
did the
than.
review for the movie, I said it's great that they base the scenes on their own capabilities. So they haven't used any stunt doubles or too much CGI or something.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
was slow pace. The whole
yeah,
movie was like, bunch of old people just driving cars or running slow. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
okay, yeah, but I love them. But still,
yeah.
it's not the same feeling that I had.
And the movie has two chase scenes where
Mhm.
he's driving big trucks.
Yeah, yeah.
Why? Why did we need two scenes with him driving big truck? Like either the first one is good or the second one where he crashes into the house. But having two just felt like okay, well, we've not only have we seen this before in other Beverly Hills Cop movies, but to see it twice in the same movie just felt like a little unimaginative. Nevertheless, it was good, and it's nice seeing Reinhold and Ashton and
Mhm.
Paul Reiser and some of the older people
Too bad Ronnie
back
Cox
again.
wasn't there. I was hoping it's gonna be
Yeah, Ronnie
like a
Cox. Yeah,
cameo. But,
I
yeah.
I have a love hate relationship with some of these legacy sequels because I know that they feel like they have to bring back all the old cast members, and I don't know. I don't get like some big rush just from seeing Paul Reiser and Eddie Murphy act on screen again. It's like I love Paul Reiser, um, but if the movie feels like it's just putting them in, you
For
know,
the sake of the putting in.
for the
Yeah.
sake of putting them in, it just doesn't feel as organic. Um, but sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm. Well, of all those legacy sequels that you've seen, which one, is okay enough that we can say?
I mean, the obvious answer is Top Gun Maverick
Mhm.
because they did such a good job of bringing, Val Kilmer came back, but for a reason that was relevant to the movie. But sometimes in insisting that all these old characters come back, it feels like our main characters haven't moved on in their lives,
Mhm.
and in Top Gun Maverick, you can really see that he's moved on in many ways. Of course, he's still in the same field, the Air Force, because he loves it. But there's new characters, there's new friends and friendships and people in his life, and I like the idea of bringing this character of Penny back, played by Jennifer Connelly, who was just mentioned briefly in the
Mhm.
first movie, but who we never saw. And then I thought that the movie did a great job of both paying homage to the first movie, but also making itself stand apart
Mhm.
from the first movie. But also, what's interesting is that the first like 20 minutes of Top Gun Maverick are basically the exact same as the first movie. Not only the opening sequence on the helicarrier, the aircraft carrier, which is great, the danger zone stuff with all the guys. But also there's like the first mission, then he gets, his ass reamed out by some guy who he then has to change locations. Then there's like he meets the new recruits at a bar, or he meets somebody else at a bar. It's kind of he meets his love interest at the bar. There's kind of like the same beats, and then once he gets involved with the younger
Hmm.
people that he's training, the movie kind of becomes its own thing. Um, but it's really just a beautifully shot and written movie. And I was fortunate to work on it. Actually,
Really?
yeah, I cut a TV spot for the movie, and originally they had asked me to work on the spot for the Super Bowl,
Hmm.
and I didn't end up finishing it, and it went to another editor. But I worked on it for 3 months, and they brought me over to the Bruckheimer Studios because that movie they were not going to let that movie out of the studio until I think until maybe the second trailer had come out when they were working on TV spots. But I went to Bruckheimer Studios. I got my own little edit bay, and while they were still editing the movie, this was back in 2019. This was in December of 2019 when it was originally supposed to be released in
Yeah,
2020.
I remember.
And me and another couple editors were working on it, and somebody would work on their TV spot, and I would work on my TV spot, and TV spots for the Super Bowl are much more. Um, uh, they get worked on a lot more, and there's a lot more attention paid to them because that Super Bowl placement is
Yeah,
still
yeah, it's
considered really
expensive. Yeah,
really
I
special.
know.
Yeah, but it was really cool. Really cool being being around. They were still working on the movie. I got to know one of the assistant editors, and Eddie Hamilton, the editor of the feature, was there working in the building as well, and I got to talk to him at one point. Really nice guy, and then so at one point I was there late one day, and the the bay that I was working at was in the back of the building, and when I came out, everybody had left for the day, except that in the front, by the front door,
Mhm.
clustered together were Tom Cruise, Jerry Bruckheimer, Joe Kosinski, Christopher McQuarrie, and a bunch of the producers. They had just screened the movie,
Yeah, yeah.
and they were talking about it, and they were standing right by the front door, and I had to leave out of the front door. And so I started walking, and I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then I turned right and went into the bathroom and
Wow.
just waited for them to leave.
Well, you get a chance
Yeah.
to meet some of those stars.
Yeah. I occasionally, there are editors I know who have gone to New Zealand to work on the Lord of the Rings movies and or the Hobbit movies, and um, the guys who have worked with Fincher, and there are filmmakers and stars that you do get to work with occasionally. We've had actors come in to read ADR for the trailer sometimes, or voiceover. Denzel came in one time, or Hemsworth came in to read VO, I think, for the Thor trailer. I remember seeing Kate Beckinsale one time. She came in for one of the Underworld movies, I think. Um, so sometimes you do. Sometimes you get to interact with the directors or the stars. It just depends on the project.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do they use editors for test audience sometimes? Because for me it would be logical to include people who are going to make either trailers or some cuts.
What's the question?
Well, do they include editors as test audience?
Oh,
Well, you're probably
oh no,
no.
no, no. We're kept far away from that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they don't want us to be influenced by that because and I understand why. It's like you spend months and months working on a trailer,
Mhm.
and then and the thing is it's not really my trailer. That's the other thing,
Yeah, yeah.
is that even though I'll edit the trailer, and if it wins an award, maybe I'll receive the award.
Mhm.
but it's really the studio's trailer. So the studio is getting feedback. It's a very interesting thing. You're like creating this thing that is both yours and not yours at all
Mhm.
because it belongs to either the trailer company or the studio, because ultimately it's the studio that's spending the money, these millions of dollars on marketing,
Mhm.
and the a movie's success can live or die by the trailer. And so they're the ones who are really sweating over whether a movie's a hit or not. If I spend 6 months on a trailer and the movie bombs, it doesn't really affect me either way, but it affects them, you know.
Where we can see some of your trailers
Hmm.
that you were involved. What movies were
So you can see all of the trailers and the TV spots and things that I've cut on my YouTube channel,
they? Hmm.
which is VHS Revolution. And my YouTube channel is great because I could show off a lot of the things that I've cut. A lot of the I have all of my TV spots going back to, and trailers going back to, I think, 2005 when I first started editing. And I have a playlist. It's just my trailers and TV spots is what it's called. And I don't yet have a website for my work. I just send people to my YouTube channel, and I have some of the reels that I also post on Instagram, and there's some other shorts that I've posted just on my YouTube channel, and you can see some of the videos and things that I've done, some of my favorite things throughout the years. But yeah, that's where you can go and see all my work is on my YouTube channel.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
inspired you to create?
Well, that's a great question. I think from an early age, I was always creative. I was always, and especially around video, before I even knew that I wanted to be a trailer editor or that I even wanted to be an editor, I was editing. I just didn't even know it, whether I would shoot something on my video camera and then transfer it to VHS. Or I remember, when I was in college, I had my video camera. This is like 97, 98, 99. I had my video camera and I would just video all my friends and our parties and things. And then during the summer, I would edit together little montages of our time together, just from going from the video camera to the VCR, record, pause,
Hmm.
go to the next piece, record, pause. It was a very long process. And then I got a little sound mixer that I would connect to. I was just telling my wife and daughter about this. It feels like so ancient now because literally you can take your phone, record a video, put to music within, you know, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But back then it took a lot longer. So I had the sound mixer that I would connect to the VCR and the stereo, and then I could play music underneath it would dub the
Hmm.
music underneath the video. But if I was lucky, maybe a couple of things would sync up correctly. But mostly it was that's why trailers from the 80s and 90s are the way that they are. You look at a trailer for like Beverly Hills Cop or two, where the song just plays underneath all the action because they're cutting on film. They can't time it. It's so much harder to time it in such a way that the explosion hits on the big part of the song or things like that. And that's why they relied on voiceover
Hmm.
so much, because it was harder to tell the stories. Nowadays, you can cut everything on the beat. Everything can be so precise. Um, but getting back to your question, uh, as a kid, I was just always creative. I acted. I was in theater. I loved to dance. I loved um, doing videos and with my friends. And I was just always drawn. That's how my brain worked. I just thought creatively or visually, sorry. And I used to love watching trailers,
Hmm.
even on other VHS tapes. And I created my own VHS tape, which I still have. I still have two, full of trailers.
Great.
And I would just watch it. I would watch that tape when I got home from school. And so I loved watching the trailers for Lethal Weapon 3 or Backdraft or uh, Die Hard with a Vengeance. I just loved seeing how the movie was presented to me in these little 2 minute um, segments, I guess you could call them. And I don't know, man. it just stuck with me. I just loved that aspect. And even when I went to film school in 2000, I went in for writing and directing. I
Hmm.
didn't even go in for editing, because to me, the editing that I had done before was just me being creative. I always, if there was if there was an option to do a video project in school, I would always go for the video project. Um, and uh, and then, but in film school, you got to do everything. And
Hmm.
so when I got to do editing and I sat down and I with the mouse and the keyboard and with the Avid for the first time, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And one of the things that I did when I was in film school, or just after when I worked there, is I did a little montage that was similar to the kind of montages I would see at the Oscars that this guy Chuck Workman used to edit. So Chuck
Hmm.
Workman edited 95% of the montages that you would see at the Oscars all through the 90s and the early 2000s. And I was really inspired by his editing. And so I did my own on the movies of the 90s. And so I had to go and rent all these DVDs and some VHSs and transfer them, rip them into the Avid. And I created this little montage. And that's kind of what I used as my calling card. And I ended up actually, when I moved to LA, I worked for Chuck Workman for the first 2 years that I was there as his assistant editor, and got to go to the Oscars and got my name in the credits and got exposed to this whole world of working in LA and editing. That was the beginning of my editing. So it's just always been in me. I'm always thinking like, what's the new creative thing? Even with the Instagram account with the VHS Revolution, I'm always thinking about like, how can I do something new that I haven't done? And so I've done different series of things like the reels that I do,
Hmm.
which
I
are
love it.
sometimes just shot scenes from the TV, and sometimes they're other things. They're interviews with people, or little segments that I do called "Did You Know," where there's a little bit of behind the scenes tidbit about a movie, or about certain directors, like the time when the Spanish directors Cuarón, Del Toro, Iñárritu, they all won Oscars for
Hmm.
directing within like a 5 year period, and sometimes consecutively. And I love all that stuff, and even something as simple as like a soundbite from Meryl Streep, talking about women and men when she was on a panel for the Post.
Hmm.
That was like my most watched reel, and you just never know what's going to strike a chord with people and what's not. Some movies I think are going to get a lot of views and a lot of comments, and they don't, and then other times other things do. I posted uh Before Sunrise back in February, I think for Valentine's Day, and that picture, that one little screenshot, is still getting liked and reshared and reposted constantly. It has like it's up to 30,000 likes or something like that for this one picture, and then the reel of them listening to the music in the sound booth still keeps getting liked and reshared, and it's just wild.
Just like
So to
those
answer
small scenes that could become meme over time, from the movie
exactly,
they're like 30 or 40 years old, and now those characters are becoming memes.
yeah, and there's so much you can do creatively, and you see a lot of it on TikTok. People do insane things that to me just seem ridiculous, but it's just people being creative and making use of the tools that are available. And there's so many tools that are available now. It's crazy, and it's getting a little dangerous with AI, but it's just fun. It's just it, I I I love creating new things, and seeing the response to them. And some things get no response, and so you think, okay, well, that's I'll move on to the next thing. And other things I'll do for a period of time and then move on. I did director tiers, where I laid
Mhm.
out all the movies that I have on VHS from like Ron Howard or Tony Scott, and then I'll categorize them in terms of tier one, tier two, and tier three. where tier one is like the absolute classics, like Tony Scott. I think I had like Top Gun, Crimson Tide, Enemy of the State, True Romance, and then tier two are the movies that are like really good but not quite the absolute classics. You know, you're Unstoppable or um I don't know what else did he do? Days of Thunder or something. And then there's tier three, which is like Revenge and Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, um and so it's both like a measure of their quality, but also a measure of like how well thought of they are
Mhm.
in the culture.
Yeah, Ridley
So that
Scott is
was
a
fun to
prime
do.
example of that. He's all over the place with his work.
He is. He's
Yeah.
all over the place. Yeah. Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
consider making a documentary about your work, about collecting movies, about your everyday life.
Well, I've considered not necessarily doing a documentary, but that's part of the reason why I started the YouTube channel. It's it's unfortunately uh been harder to do consistently, not than I thought, because I knew that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to come up with a concept, shoot it, edit it, put it out, do all the little thumbnails and all the things. Um, but you know, my job has kept me busy. You know, I work during the day, and then that only leaves so much time on the weekends and in the evenings, and I'm mostly spending that with my family. And so I've done fewer YouTube videos than I wanted to. I've also thought about doing a podcast. Um, there's so many ideas and possibilities of things to do, and I might do more of them in the future. I have thought about doing a documentary about trailers,
Mhm.
and about the history of trailers. And I think there are a couple out there, but they're not as current. Um, and that would be something that I would consider doing as a documentary one day, probably when I'm not involved in the industry, in the trailer industry. I don't know. I don't know. It's something that I thought about. It could be really cool, but it also could be really niche, you know,
Mhm.
and I don't, you know, people love trailers and they love commenting on trailers, but do people love them enough to want to go see a documentary? I don't know. We'll
Mhm.
see. We'll see what people think, you
Yeah,
know.
I would definitely like to see that. I don't want to
Yeah,
take too much of your time, so I'll have just one question.
sure.
Is there any advice for anyone who wants to go into movie business, whether editing or any
Yeah.
connection to movies in a way, whether it's collecting or anything? Do you have some advice for that people? How to start, how to keep up, how to stay motivated and focused.
Well, collecting VHS definitely, as you can see, takes up a lot of space.
Hmm.
So if you're going to start doing that, make sure you have the space for it. Um, and I don't know. I think my advice for anyone who wants to do anything is you really have to love that thing, because there's going to be a lot of rejection and a lot of you know, ladders to climb, and especially if you're going to edit trailers, you have to really love editing, because you're going to have to start, especially if you start at a company. It might be a little different now because of all the different platforms and different ways of getting your work out there. But when I started, you know, I had to start at the bottom, and you have to be willing to do all the things that are not trailer editing, so you can kind of build up a reputation with people, and then you start editing things on your own and showing them to people and getting feedback and kind of building up your work. Um, but like I said, especially with trailer editing, I'll get to the other part of it in a second. But with trailer editing, there's so much rejection. I mean, 95% of the things that you edit don't make it out there, online or into the theaters, and it's just part of the process because there's so much competition. And so if you're doing it to be seen or for the likes or for the awards, then it's not going to go very well for you. You got to really love editing. You got to love the process of taking a movie and boiling it down to 2 minutes and figuring out not just what the story of the trailer is, but how best to present a movie to people in such a way that it makes them want to see the movie. Um, and also filmmaking. You know, I've made a couple of short films. I'm working on writing, and it takes a lot of focus, especially when you have jobs and family, and uh, you need to make money, and it takes a lot of focus and commitment to getting that thing done, and also learning about how to do that thing in the way that, especially writing a script, learning about the format, learning about the structure of a script, learning about the beats, reading books, listening to podcasts, reading articles, watching YouTube videos. YouTube is such a great resource right now for everything, really. But especially for screenwriting and movie making. And I don't know that it's a great resource for trailer editing yet. I know there's a couple of YouTube channels that are about editing and trailers. Um, but yeah, it just all takes, you got to have some patience. You got to let yourself make mistakes, fail, get let go from jobs, even though it sucks. You just go out and find the next thing. And even though it feels hard or even impossible in the moment, I know from experience that pushing through that, trusting yourself, trusting that it's going to work out, will lead to success and that rewarding feeling.
Well, this was a wonderful talk, David. Thank
Yeah,
you so much
thanks.
for this amazing conversation and for sharing so much with us. Now we are
Oh
more
yeah.
informed about the whole process of trailer editing and
Oh
collecting
yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah, it was really amazing. So
Yeah.
I hope
Thank
we'll
you.
get a chance to talk again
Absolutely.
because this was amazing. Thank you so much and see you soon. Happy hunting.